Building a digital economy is both an opportunity and a necessity. The economic activity that results from billions of daily online connections among people, businesses, governments, devices, data, and processes is at the heart of the digital economy. And experts say it is the impetus for resilient economic growth in the Caribbean. Digitization grows capability and capacity, boosts entrepreneurship and innovation, simplifies doing business, removes barriers to trade, and creates highly skilled, well-paid work. Welcome to the October edition of the Caribbean Economic Forum on how to digitize an economy with our distinguished international panel. Rwanda, Paula Ingabere, Minister of ICT Innovation. Rodney Taylor, Director, Data Processing Department, Ministry of Innovation, Science and Technology, Barbados. Akila Byron Nisbet, Minister of Health, ICT, Entertainment, Entrepreneurship and Talent Development, St. Kitts and Nevis. I'm Julian Rogers in Kingston, Jamaica. On behalf of our host, the Central Bank of Barbados, welcoming all on television, radio and online to the October edition of the Caribbean Economic Forum. So glad you could join us and join our panel. And let me first start by welcoming Anki Scott-Joseph, who is our online moderator. She's got some words of encouragement for you and why you should join us and follow this discussion. Anki, welcome.
Hi, Julian. Good evening to our viewers. My message is simple. I invite you to connect and share with us on one of the world's most popular social media platforms, Facebook. With over 1.6 billion users, Facebook is a useful example of digital transformation. Beyond technology, digital transformation is about connecting people to media and in the process, creating value. So join the conversation. Julia, let's get the discussion started.
Well, thank you very much, Anki, and welcome everybody. And as she says, we're connecting, thanks to the internet, to people all over the world. And our distinguished international panel, of course, from Rwanda, from Barbados, and also from St. Kitts Nevis, the Federation, down in the Leewards grouping. So let's get the discussion underway, because we're talking about the fact that the world economy and societies are really going through what is called a digital transformation. That goes well beyond using computers and the information and telecom and technologies, for instance. So this we see as a transformation that will create opportunities and challenges, particularly for governments. And that's why we've assembled this panel this evening to look at the situation. So governments, as you would understand at a time like this, will be facing shortages of skills, equipment, and physical infrastructure. And while having to address the emerging challenges in cybersecurity, risk management, and data protection, the digital transformation calls for cooperation at many levels of society. So let's get underway by looking at what has happened so far in the three countries that we have as our guest. Let's go first to Rwanda, which has been trumpeted as one of the best examples of digital transformation. But if you hear from Paula Ingabere, the Minister of ICT and Innovation, that process started a long time ago. So let's welcome the Minister, and let's hear about the history of the transformation that you got underway, as the records show, some 20 years ago.
Thanks, Julian, and it's a pleasure being with you this evening and really exchanging ideas. And just to get straight into the question that you asked, and as you rightly said, ours has been a journey of slightly over 20 years, where as the government of Rwanda, we made the deliberate intention to integrate ICT's technology and innovation into our socio-economic development agenda. And so, of course, on the onset, really, we were starting with a very nascent industry. It was close to non-existent. At that point, we probably had only one company within the telecommunication industry, and that was pretty much it. And so, in starting out with such a vision of one, understanding, embracing that technology and innovation were going to be a key driver for our socio-economic development process as a country, for our, for our recovery process. It really even meant just starting off with outlining what the vision looks like and what we're really intending to achieve. And so what we did was really to break down our, ICT journey into, 5 4-year rolling plans. And the very first one was focused on really putting in place, the right foundations for creating such a digital economy, the institutional frameworks. That's how the ministry was created. the implementation agency in charge of driving ICT development and growth. But at the same time, even looking at some of the regulatory frameworks that were required. And as I said, because we were starting off from really, from scratch, we had to even think about things like, liberalizing the telecommunication market to encourage more players to come in. And so it was really those first 5 years of really thinking about what are some of those foundational institutional aspects that need to be put in place to drive this kind of process, to drive this kind of vision of really becoming a digital economy. And so once that was underway, institutions are put in place, try to get the right resources on board to lead this kind of digital transformation. I think the next core foundation was thinking about the infrastructure. And for Rwanda, what we had to do was to think about what kind of ICT infrastructure is going to be needed to enable the level of digital transformation, the impact of digital transformation that we wanted to see within the economy. And so with that, we had to think about laying out fiber across the entire country, connecting all our 30 districts and border points, and using that really as a backbone that would then, over the years, be leveraged as we think about last mile connectivity solutions. But that wasn't just the only infrastructure component that we were focused on as a country. We had to think about information assets, putting in place a data center, from a security perspective, the cybersecurity type of infrastructure that would support with safeguarding our information and infrastructure assets. And so that brought us to the end of the very first 10 years. And so the next step for us was then in the next 5 years, which was 2011 to 2015, was focusing on how do we leverage now this infrastructure to drive the digital transformation agenda that we had as a country. And really this is where we're looking at service digitization, interventions around telemedicine, healthcare industry, how do we mainstream technology and innovation into the education sector in terms of building the human capital development levels that we're looking for, being a heavily agriculture-based economy, thinking about what technologies are going to be central as a starting point to really driving the agriculture sector. And so really being specific in these different sectors of the economy to practically think about some of those solutions that were going to drive innovation and digital transformation in those sectors. And so that's the journey that we're still on. And even just looking at it and looking at the progress that has been registered today, pretty much all services of government are being provided online, making it easy for citizens to access government services. Farmers are connected through different tools that allow them to get access to financing, access to inputs and markets as well. Education is still an area where we're continuously investing, not just putting devices in the hands of the students and the teachers, but thinking about digitizing content, thinking about giving them the right skills that are required. And of course, lastly, what we're also looking at is now to say the other backbone of the economy is the small and medium enterprises. How are we supporting the digitalization of SMEs that allows them to really, play a critical role in developing the economy, but at the same time, as a proof of concept country, think about how we nurture these SMEs in a way that they're going to expand beyond the Rwandan jurisdiction. So I'll pause there and be happy to have some follow-on questions on that. Thank you.
It's every time we look at the situation of Rwanda, we of course recognize that you've done all that on the back of a very disastrous history of recent times, so that there's no surprise that you're regarded as a kind of a poster boy so far for the digitization process and the progress you've made so far. We'll come back and ask you some more about the challenges along the way, but let's get a fix on what has happened in Barbados. And I teased my next guest, Rodney Taylor of Barbados, by suggesting that the department that he now heads may be just as old as I am, but he'll fix that, no doubt. Rodney, welcome.
Thank you very much, Julian. It might actually be older, but I smiled as I listened to the contribution of Minister Ingabire, and I'm actually honored to be on the panel with her and our minister from St. Kitts and Nevis, because what she spoke about is it's like a blueprint for digital transformation of an economy. She spoke about the development of the telecom sector, the need for fiber. Barbados has had excellent fiber for quite a while. We have fiber to the home. In fact, there's really good connectivity in Barbados. There's good mobile phone penetration because the infrastructure is critical at a foundational level for the transformation of an economy. And Barbados, because of our small size, I believe, and because of our open and competitive telecom sector, a good regulatory environment, we have good fiber, we have good mobile connectivity. And while efforts have been as far back as in the 1970s with the establishment of the department, which I now head, from 2018, we've had a more concentrated focus with the establishment of the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology, headed by Senator the Honorable Kay McConney, who unfortunately could not be here tonight, and so I'm sitting in her stead and I'm honored to do so. And so there's now a very strategic focus with the ministry. So we now have the institutional framework. We're now looking at the regulatory and policy framework to reform the ICT sector within Barbados and to drive innovation and entrepreneurship in the tech sector. And all of this is critical to enable the development of the digital economy. Things like political leadership, so that there is support from the highest levels of government. The Prime Minister has spoken on many occasions about the need for digital transformation, about how we need to innovate within the region across all sectors, in arts and entertainment, in agriculture and what's not. We have distinguished ourselves as a region in cricket, for example, and entertainment, arts and entertainment. And we need now to take this excellence into the era of technological innovation. And so everything that Minister Ingabire has said, I want to echo that and support that. And of course, it must be supported by a very robust cybersecurity framework so that persons have the confidence to do transactions online. And in that respect, we are actually in the process of implementing a national digital identity within Barbados, and we expect that to be available around January 2021, and that in itself will engender a level of trust with respect to online services. We have actually also embarked on a number of projects under an IDB-funded public sector modernization program, and we've seen the fruition of many services, including the Police Certificate of Character, which is one of the services that was a real bugbear in terms of persons being able to apply for jobs. That is one of the things that they needed, Police Certificate of Character. That is now digital end-to-end. You can apply and receive that certificate online. The renewal of driver's license and a number of other services, and very recently the Barbados Welcome Stamp, and we spoke about COVID and the impacts to the region. And the Barbados Welcome Stamp has been one of Barbados's responses in terms of the COVID and welcoming people to work, the digital nomads, to work from Barbados and access our very excellent world-class digital infrastructure to come and work from here. So if you're working from home, why not come and work in a warm Caribbean climate? Why would you want to be stuck in New York or London in the cold? Why not come here and rent a seaside villa, enjoy fiber connectivity at speeds, 1 terabyte up to 1 terabyte per second, and work from home. So there are advantages and disadvantages with respect to COVID, and I just want to say that in terms of digital transformation, the government of Barbados has really made a push with the establishment of the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology to ensure that Barbados benefits from this new digital paradigm. And I'll stop here as well.
All right. Rodney, I think you set a nice framework there for us to continue to track exactly what's happening in the rest of the Caribbean. And here's where I welcome Akila Byron Nisbet, who has quite a mixed bag in terms of her portfolio. She's a Minister of Health, ICT, Entertainment, Entrepreneurship, and Talent Development. And that must be a very heavy load, particularly at a time like this, Minister, where you've got to deal with COVID and also deal with the transformation of the entire country where ICT is concerned. So welcome.
Thank you so much, and it is my pleasure to be here tonight. I am so happy to be part of this panel, and I was very much moved by the presentation by Rwanda and the Honorable Minister. And why I was so moved is because listening to her, it tells me that the path that St. Kitts and Nevis is on is going to bear some fruits for us to be able to enjoy. I mean, COVID-19 in particular have triggered all of our economies to fast track our digital transformation strategies, and the countries and the jurisdictions that will survive are those who will be able to adopt. In terms of St. Kitts and Nevis, in 2019, our government would have embarked on our strategic path to accelerate towards an innovative digital economy through the implementation of our digital transformation strategy, which covers the time period of 2020 through to 2022. Of course, COVID would have set us back a bit, but we're still working on that path towards our digital transformation, because our vision is to make St. Kitts and Nevis a world leader in digital services delivery for our citizens, our residents, the private sector, as well as investors. And we want to be able to do this in a manner that is safe, efficient, interactive, responsive, and one that would meet the needs of our end users and would allow us to grow our economy as well as contribute to our national development. The approach we are taking is very similar to Rwanda, which is why I'm so happy to have heard from the Honorable Minister, and it warmed my heart and gave me comfort that indeed we are on that right path, because one of we're using a simple approach, but we know it's important. And that is one that ensures that the foundational elements are implemented from the outset. And so we are embarking right now on developing our whole of government technology strategy. And as she would have indicated, cybersecurity strategy is going to be tied with our development of our technology strategy, because we understand, just as was said from our panelists from Barbados, that persons need to have that confidence that the data is secured, and they need to have confidence in the integrity of the data, especially the data that will be housed for government services. And so we are looking at a structural approach to technology implementation. We want to be able to strengthen our government-wide area network. We do have quite a bit of fiber that's in place, but we want to extend that fiber and ensure that we can deliver, just like Barbados, fiber to the home. But not only do we want to deliver fiber to the home, we also want to increase our Wi-Fi hotspots as well, so that rural communities are able to access robust and high quality services, but of course at an affordable price to our consumers. Now, we understand that in order for us to achieve full digital transformation, it means that we'll have to review our policies and legislation as well. And so we're in the process of undergoing review of our current legislation that we would have had in place, many of which are scattered across a number of different legislations. So we need to figure out amendments that would allow us to standardize those regulations, such as our Data Protection Act, or Interception of Communications Act, or Electronic Crimes Act, and our Freedom of Information Act. And we also understand there's going to be that need for more targeted digital legislation to ensure that our laws enable us to transform in a way that will be successful for us. And in that vein, just recently, our government would have tabled in Parliament our new Electronic Communications Act to help us to modernize the legislation for our growing electronic communications sector. And so the Electronic Communications Bill would have had its first reading in August, and it is thought that this bill would replace our Telecommunication Act and provide a more upgraded regulatory framework for our telecommunications and our ICT sectors. And in terms of security, it's not just about our cybersecurity strategy, but our National ICT Center is also in the process of implementing our ISO 27001, which is the Information Security Management System, and we're expected to be able to deliver that by 2021. So we want to make sure that security is in place, we want to make sure that the population understands that they can be confident in going online and accessing services online from the government. So far in our digitization process, we would have already launched a website specifically for our Ministry of Justice and Legal Affairs, which sees all of our laws in an online database, which allows our legislature and the general public as a whole to be able to access our laws online. We are also seeing this with our land registry. As our land records, we have moved towards digitizing those as well with the help of the Republic of China and Taiwan. And we want to be able to ensure that our attorneys as well as the general public would be able to search databases, the land database, and be able to identify searches of titles, as well as be notified of our land registration and track progress and registration of lands from submission right down to collection. A part of that too will include a cadastral mapping system, which will be utilized to do drone aerial imagery for greater accuracy delivery of real-time coordinates, so that our land surveyors will be able to have the most up-to-date and most accurate coordinates for when they are doing what they need to do as well. And of course, as the Minister of Health, I have to ensure that we digitize our health offering within the public sector. And so we're in the process of implementing our health information system. That too was through the assistance of the Republic of China and Taiwan. So this way we're going to ensure that all of our government's health service offerings are digitized, and that means that our residents and citizens would be given a medical ID that would follow them throughout our health system. So should you need medical attention at one of our institutional base, that is our hospitals, then you could go there, get the care. Your ID, your medical ID and ID card would allow us to be able to have access to your records, as well as if you choose to go to our health centers to have that type of service as well, the information would follow you there. So there's quite a bit that St. Kitts and Nevis is doing. We have been trying to do some digitization while we work towards our digital transformation. And of course, we're just going to make sure that the foundation, that is our strategies, are in place. We have to make sure our security is in place, but we're moving towards ensuring that once we are digitally transformed, it will be a successful one. And I'll stop there for now and allow us to continue.
Akila Byron Nisbet, I tell you that certainly warms our heart to hear the implementation process taking place in the Federation. Let me turn again to Rwanda and to Minister Ingabire. I'm curious to learn from you, Minister, the reaction on the ground. I mean, you're dealing with what, 12 million people and a huge landmass, etc. I know that you've shown us a track of the implementation of a period of time, but I want to get a sense of the reaction on the ground of people to being told, look, we are going to make it possible for you to do this and that, particularly, for instance, the people in the rural communities in the agricultural sector.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think what we need to look at, I mean, at the end of the day, all this would have not been possible if there wasn't a very solid social contract between the government and the people, where, you know, the citizens here in Rwanda have a level of trust, of understanding this is the vision that has been set out. But also, I think the different mechanisms that we've put in place as a government, one, to ensure that the process of mapping out priorities, the processes of deciding on what interventions you know, government is going to be investing in, given the limited resources that we have. At the end of the day, citizen-centric in nature, are thinking about the citizen, what's, you know, how do they gain, but also working backwards to say what needs to be put in place. And so that consultative process that also involves the citizen is very crucial. And it also doesn't stop at just design and consultation. It's the accountability that follows it when we start implementation. We have a unique model of performance contracts that is implemented here in Rwanda. In our mother language, it's called Imihigo. And basically what happens happens, it's the typical framework of performance contracts that you will have in any organization. But what happens is that once leaders, sectors, institutions identify the priorities that are going to be implemented within a specific fiscal year, then these are presented to the citizens. We'll have a 1 to 2 day session where these priorities are presented. But then there's going to be another aspect where we come back a year later to evaluate together with the citizens and even get their input on what has worked and what hasn't worked. And I think that in itself hasn't just promoted accountability, but has also enabled us to make some changes, because sometimes the strategies you put in place may be very good, but when you start implementation, the reality on the ground is also different. And so how do you build in that agility to be able to respond to those changes? And I think with the citizens, it's important that, it's a process that they have to work with together with us. Now, and maybe let me also touch, I think you had earlier talked about challenges, because I think it also responds to partly this question of how, what's the sense, the feel on the ground. And even looking backward in hindsight, I think one of the things that we should all be doing, and even for many of the countries that are now embarking on this journey, is putting first and foremost investment in skills. Because if the citizens don't have even the very basic digital literacy skills to understand the tools that are being put at their disposal, but not just to understand, but also to know how to use them, then inevitably there may be resistance that is not stemming from not understanding the value of these investments, but just not being able to use some of these tools. And so the whole issue around skills and readiness and ensuring that citizens have the right tools and skills to really understand the kind of investments that are being made, what their role is going to be. And even as we deploy most of these tools, making sure that a big chunk of it is not just focused on change management, but is also focused on training them. Now, I think pretty much if we had to compare with many economies, especially when you talk about rural areas, there will still be a very low literacy, just basic literacy. We're not even talking about digital literacy, very low literacy levels in the rural areas. How do we ensure that this person is not left behind? And so for Rwanda, what we had to do was to create an agency model that allows for the different agents that have been identified, that have been trained, that have been equipped with the right tools to be within the communities, where they will be able to help citizens within those communities, one, to access the services, two, to build their literacy. Today we have a program that we are scaling that is called the Digital Ambassadors Program, and pretty much what we're doing is getting students that are coming out of university. They have high levels of literacy, but also we've trained them on digital literacy. We integrate them into the communities. We also prefer to pick students that are to pick someone who lives in a certain community, because they pretty much understand the context better than having to bring someone completely new within the community. And then we give them a curriculum and tools where they have to train citizens year long, to the extent where we'll say the dependence on agents, the dependence on third parties to be able to access services, to be able to access information using all these digital platforms continues to lessen, and we're empowering citizens to have the ability to do that themselves. And so it's really work in progress. I can't say it's something you'll knock off immediately when you start this journey, but it's really understanding how that builds into each and every intervention as government, as private sector, that you put in place as you build many of these tools.
And I just give you, in a minute or so, I just want you to respond quickly to ask, to the question really, is the system you have in place make it easier for you to handle this COVID environment?
The answer is yes. And I think if it hadn't been for the investments that we had made as government, I think we did talk about them over the last 20 or so years, it would have been difficult to do so. When I look at the different interventions that we've had in how we are integrating technology to respond to COVID, all the way from contact tracing to supporting with quarantine measures, to even mapping out some of the high-risk areas using some of these artificial intelligence models that have been built by our different talented workforce. I think it's been difficult to do that. We've even gone to the extent, I think you probably also, Julian, read this in the news, where we're already thinking of where have we used some of these fourth industrial revolution technologies to respond to a need. The case in point is drones that have been used in the healthcare sector to transport blood, and then say, as we come to COVID, as we respond to COVID, is there another use case for this? And so these have been ways of really saying, how do we leverage the already existing investments in technology to respond to COVID?
Okay, Minister, nicely timed. We're going to take a quick break here and we'll come back and continue our focus on how do we digitize our economies of the Caribbean with lessons we're learning from Rwanda. We'll be right back.
Solutions for common problems during this COVID situation. We fighting to protect our livelihood across the nation. This is for we to learn, share ideas and concerns, to live life like we deserve. We must change we mindset first. Build strong economies, closer to scientists. We all have a duty. CEF is for me and you. Beyond COVID, CEF is for me and you. Caribbean Economic Forum, move. Beyond COVID, CEF is for me and you. Caribbean Economic Forum.
Visit www.centralbank.org.bb for more information.
Each summer, the Central Bank of Barbados offers a student a chance to help change the world through a scholarship to attend the Caribbean Science Foundation's student program for innovation in science and engineering. It's designed for 16 and 17-year-olds gifted in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and is a replica of the well-known MITES program at MIT. We're nurturing young, inquisitive minds who could transform our economy, our region, and our world.
The Financial Stability Report checks the health of Barbados' financial system and is published by the Central Bank of Barbados and the Financial Services Commission, the regulators of our domestic financial institutions like banks, credit unions, insurance companies, and pension funds.
Both sides of the coin tells the history of the first 45 years of the Central Bank of Barbados. It salutes unsung heroes who fashioned a modern society and economy and built an institution of which every Barbadian can be proud. Perfect for economists, business people, politicians, and anyone who wants to learn more about the Central Bank of Barbados and how its staff serves you and contributes to our economic and financial development. Download your free copy today.
Welcome back, of course, as we give you a chance now to better understand the whole matter of digital transformation, and we're happy to have representatives of three governments with us, from Barbados, from the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, and from the government of Rwanda. But let's turn our attention to the email that is first coming into our box here at the forum, and it's a quick question. How have Barbadians and Kittitians responded to your digitization efforts? And in fact, I was going to ask that question of Rodney Taylor first up.
Thank you very much, Julian. That's an excellent question, and they have responded very well. They have been demanding these services. If you look, for example, I mentioned the police certificate of character, and that's a service that before took weeks just to even get an appointment to go and apply for it. And now you can do it from the comfort of your home, any time of day, any time of night, and that's a 24-hour turnaround. We talk about the driver's license, the renewal of your driver's license. That's also a service that's another 24-hour turnaround. Comfort of your home. Within COVID has driven the uptake of these services because offices are closed or people want to social distance or physical distance. And so we have seen a tremendous uptake of our online service or Easy Pay payments for things like land tax and renewal of the same driver's license and so on. And there has been a tremendous response. Within the first week of launching the renewal of the driver's license, we had about 500 persons applying, and we partnered actually with the Barbados Postal Service, not just so that you can actually not just apply for it, but if you chose to, you can have that driver's license, renewed driver's license delivered to your home or office. So there has been a tremendous response, and it is clear that persons are demanding these services, and in particular because of COVID and the fact that it is now a much bigger hassle to actually go and stand in line or wait outside to enter a government office, that we have seen the uptake of these digital services. So a very positive response from here in Barbados.
All right, let's find out from Byron Nisbet, Minister in St. Kitts Nevis. What's the reaction on the ground there?
Well, certainly it's the same as in Barbados in that we are seeing very positive uptake in persons who want the government to move as quickly as I would say that the private sector and even individuals have been moving. And I just wanted to share some statistics just to put it into perspective. So in St. Kitts and Nevis, our population is around 53,000. According to ITU, our internet users is around 42,000. Our internet penetration is 80%, and our mobile internet users is around 39.1 thousand. So that tells you that the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, they are looking towards more and more digitization as they themselves and they conduct their businesses digitally and whether it is through the internet, using a computer or through mobile internet use. As a matter of fact, I would say that over the past 7 months, we have seen an increase in the use of our government information and services that are online. Our Inland Revenue Department, just as in Barbados, persons are able to renew their licenses online, and they have been demanding for these services online. We've also been seeing a number of new tech businesses, such as one that we call Jad Cash, which is actually a mobile payment solution that is offered to much of our small businesses. And these mobile payment solutions allow our small businesses to be able to provide a payment option without having to pay for debit card or credit card machines. All it is just a transfer of funds between accounts using this mobile app. And so we have this increase in online collaboration that was brought on due to COVID-19, and we're seeing even our church services and community events now taking on a virtual platform. Just recently we would have had our general elections that would have been in June, and we would have had the launch of our virtual campaigns, and with that too we have seen that out of that came the Ministry of Entrepreneurship, Entertainment and Talent Development, a subsection of which deals specifically with innovation, because we would have seen how the young persons would have allowed us to be able to have our virtual campaigns, and the government, the Prime Minister in particular, was rather impressed with the services that they were able to offer, and he thought that it was important for us to develop this new ministry that would give them the avenue to be able to have that foundation necessary to build on that type of technology so that they can leverage it to increase their business and to have more of a reach. And so this new ministry will have a specific focus on creatives and innovators, and it has been very much welcomed by especially the young persons. So in a sense, I believe Where we are now is that the government is in a sense playing catch up because the general public in particular are demanding these types of services. They want to be able to do or transact business with the government electronically, just as they can order their dinner online and have it delivered through our 869 to go services. They want to be able to have that service with government. So it is very much welcomed, and persons really can't wait for us to be able to completely digitize all of our government services. So that is where I would say we are in terms of Kitishans and Nivisions. We can't forget Nivisions, who are welcoming this change.
All right, these kinds of changes and the openness and the stepped up acceptance of these services raises a particular question, and that is the matter of security. And I want to bring somebody who is a specialist in this area here to make a few comments and lead off that portion of the discussion this evening. He's Dwight Robinson. He's Secretary of what is known as the Information Systems and Security of Barbados, and he joins us now. Dwight, good evening, welcome.
Good evening, thank you.
So let's talk about the challenges here, because all this tons and thousands of information, etc., that is being exposed and available. What should we be comfortable about in real terms, that all of this data is available left, right, and center? How much are we protected?
No, the reality is that we can't talk about digitization without talking about security. And the reality is that as we do more technology, we have to do more protecting ourselves and our data online as well too. I think it's important to consider, as mentioned, strategy is an important part of it. And I'm very happy to see that persons like the Development Minister from St. Kitts and also from Rwanda mentioned that strategy is an important part of their journeys in terms of digitization. I'm very happy to hear that. I think overall for businesses, it's important to see how your business processes are changed as a result of digitization. It's also important to see how your business processes change and also how yourself can secure your processes as a result. It's not just one thing to come and add new technology to old processes. It's important to see exactly how those processes are changed and how you can protect businesses and your customers as a result. I think it's important to consider what's crucial to your business and what data is critical as a part of that process too. I think too often we add new technology to old processes and forget about exactly how to secure them. It becomes a black box to say that's added on to businesses, and no one quite knows exactly what goes into it or what comes out or exactly what happens within those systems too. I think it's important to protect the data that is used, being processed and handled, especially considering privacy as being so important within our region, that we ensure that information is protected in all mediums in terms of when it's stored, processed, transferred, and ensure that in all cases that information is properly protected based on its importance and also where it's being used and being transferred to. I think we've seen a number of cyber attacks within the region, especially within recent times, with some larger conglomerates being targeted. That is not a surprise to anyone. Within the Caribbean, we equally targeted as much as the rest of the world. As a matter of fact, we're actually more targeted within the region compared to the rest of the world. Based on some stats from Checkpoint, the security company, the Caribbean, including the Caribbean and Latin American region, is actually more attacked than the rest of the world disproportionately. And this is on all categories in terms of mobile, banking, crypto mining, botnets, and ransomware combined. And that is very scary when you consider that we're embarking on plans for digitization. Do we really have a proper handle exactly what we're doing? Do we really understand exactly what exposure we're giving ourselves as a result of being out there and adding these services? It's great to see the governments of St. Kitts and Barbados embarking on these journeys and having strategies that properly assess and protect themselves. But it's important to all the way down to individual businesses themselves to have what's necessary to protect this themselves too. I think it's more than enough. It's more than just having a strategy too. It's having a consistent approach that ensures that everyone has all that's necessary in terms of the regulations, the assistance with guidelines, implement international standards. All these things help to ensure that businesses have what's necessary to protect themselves, protect the general public, and also move to digitization in the correct way.
Dwight, thank you very much for giving us a guide as to exactly where we stand. And of course, obviously, there's a lot of work still to be done in that particular area. Let's take some of the feedback we're getting. It's coming in via email this time. And let's share the reaction we're getting online. Don't forget, you still have an opportunity to contribute via our Facebook page, and Anki Joseph will come back and give us a summation of some of your comments. But right now, how is Rwanda collaborating with its neighbors to build out Africa as a digital hub? Again, a good question. Let's bring back the Minister of Rwanda. Minister Ingabire?
Thanks, Julian. That's a very good question indeed. And maybe I'll start off with, I think just like many of our countries are focused on putting in place the ICT infrastructure as a foundation, that's also a starting point for the kind of collaboration that we have within the region and also within the continent. And so what we did for the East African region was to put in place, a connectivity infrastructure that connects all the countries, that allows for us to have equal access to connectivity, but also to reduce the transit cost so that ultimately it's also cheap for our citizens. But increasingly, when the focus initially is infrastructure, and once it's put in place, I think the next part then is to say, how do we, make sense of how do we leverage this infrastructure? Today we've put in place our Northern Corridor kind of framework that brings us together as countries within the East African region or in the Northern Corridor. And pretty much what we do is to really map out those kind of priorities that need consensus across the board. We just talked about cybersecurity, that's one of them. And the intention that we have as East African countries is creating a cybersecurity center that one can serve to skill the kind of critical mass resources that we're looking for in cybersecurity, but at the same time, develop tools that can support how we protect and safeguard these infrastructure and information asset investments that we're making. Another one is what we call the single digital market. Of course, more and more as we digitize, we need to be able to trade across borders. We need to be able to trade as neighbors. We need to be able to use my card or whatever payment method I have in Rwanda to pay for goods within in Kenya, and then they can be delivered. So how do you organize that piece, knowing that it's going to be data that is flowing? Today we have one of our centers that is working on a framework for cross-border data flow that is really focused on how do we ensure that as we transact across borders, we're still also building in the capacity to know how data is protected. Do we protect data the same way as Kenya does, as Tanzania does, as DRC does, as Uganda does? And so just making sure that there's that alignment and harmonization from a policy and legislation perspective, and then going to the next level of saying what platforms do we need to build that are going to allow for us to build this digital hub. And lastly, what we're also looking at is every country has a strategy to become either a leading innovation hub, a leading digital hub. What we also recognize very much is that none of us is an island. And so none of us is going to develop on their own while the rest of the neighboring countries are not able to develop. But also we need to understand that when we're building the private sector, we can't just focus on our market. So we need to be thinking about our neighbors, and that aggregated market is really what is going to drive growth of some of these digital businesses. So to achieve that, what we've decided to do is to say, what is each one's strength? So if one country is strong in artificial intelligence capabilities and the other one is in cybersecurity and the other one is in digital ID systems, the other one is in robotics, how do we build those synergies that are going to allow us to really leverage each other's strength so that it's a hub that has those kind of complementarities? So in Rwanda, we have what we call the Kigali Innovation City. We have focus areas where we think this is what our strength is, this is where we can be a leader, this is where we can create cutting-edge technologies. We know Kenya has the same, all the other countries, and it's not a question of just competition, it's really those complementarities that allow for an industry-wide kind of approach, but also that allows for many of these companies that are coming from our different economies to scale and grow beyond just one jurisdiction. Thank you.
Thank you too, Minister. Before I ask the other panelists to weigh in on the regional cooperation and these matters similar as you've laid out, let me turn our attention to the survey which we posted earlier and see what the feedback has been like from our audience. Now, which sector would benefit most from digital transformation? That's a survey question. And we gave people the choices of agriculture, banking and finance, education, government, healthcare, manufacturing, retail, and tourism. Well, so far the voting is in support of government as that sector which would benefit most from digital transformation. Not a surprise there based on the contributions we've heard from the panelists this evening. The other big point is banking and finance, which again is not a surprise. But I want to talk. I want to give Rodney Taylor and Minister Byron Nisbet an opportunity to talk about the regional cooperation in the CARICOM community as far as the matter of digitization is concerned. Rodney, you go first.
Thank you, Julian. I think it's the CARICOM heads of government as far back as I think it's 2007, as far back as that, agreed to the establishment of the CARICOM single ICT space. Within the region, there's a commitment for a CARICOM single ICT space, and it's very similar to what is being done in Africa. We have the CSME, a block of countries within the region, and we understand that alone we are very small markets, but collectively we are very attractive in terms of foreign direct investment, in terms of the development of the telecoms and ICT sector, and so the governments have committed to that, and it includes the things like the elimination of roaming, as the EU has done within the CARICOM single market and economy. So I moved from here to Trinidad or Jamaica, St. Kitts and Nevis, and what have you. That's one space. So the notion of roaming should not apply. I'm on the same network. The plan also includes the zero rating of government services or public services. So if I'm accessing or if I want to pay my driver's license or file my taxes, I'm in Trinidad using a Barbados phone or whatever, those services, those public services which were really established for public good should be zero rated. They should not draw down on my data. And this is a commitment of the CARICOM heads of government, is something our own Prime Minister, while she was chair of CARICOM just a few months ago, advocated for and tried to push. And now we now have a new chair of CARICOM, but it is something that remains on the agenda of CARICOM heads of government. I just also wanted to say very briefly in terms of the intervention with respect to cybersecurity, that we understand, Barbados understands the need for this, and we're working with the Organization of American States to establish a national cybersecurity strategy, and we're working with the established cybersecurity working group that involves members of the private sector. In fact, just yesterday I was on a panel discussion with the same ISSA association to talk about cybersecurity and what is being done. In addition to that, I also want to say that Barbados in last year passed the Data Protection Act. It is now to be proclaimed, but that is a very forward move in terms of being compliant and establishing public confidence in digital services, and also being compliant with the EU GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. So I just wanted to just add that in terms of what is happening on the cybersecurity front and in terms of data protection. But the heads of government have agreed to establish a CARICOM single ICT space, and that's being spearheaded by the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, a regional organization based in Trinidad. And there's a commitment that we can move together as a region to enable the digital transformation of the CARICOM group of countries. Thank you.
Let me give Minister Byron Nisbet an opportunity to weigh in here on the benefits of Caribbean cooperation.
Most certainly, just coming based off of what was said by our panelists from Barbados in terms of the CARICOM, and we know we have the CARICOM Impacts as well, who has been engaged in a number of partnerships with the World Bank to ensure that the Caribbean Digital Transformation Program is achieved, and that is ensuring that we have access to the digital services, technologies, and skills by governments, businesses, and individuals. So at the CARICOM level, Impacts continues to do its part to ensure that the region as a whole is able to develop that digital transformation model that is required, so that all of the CARICOM countries there will be no one left behind in that sense. Now, if we come closer to OECS in particular, the Eastern Caribbean Telecommunications Union continues to do its part as well to ensure that we are able to standardize our communications and telecommunications in particular in the Eastern Caribbean. And so we are seeing that level of coordination of efforts within the ECTEL member states to ensure that at the communications level we're able to achieve that type of standardization across. And that is where our electronic communications bill would have come from. It's about standardizing legislation and standardizing the way in which our communication networks work throughout the entire ECTEL region and member states. Now, if we look at the financial and banking side of things, we can't do that without talking about the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, who have now decided to move towards a digital currency that in and of itself creates that platform necessary for the OECS to build upon so that we can ensure that we're able to truly achieve the digitization. You know, having a digital currency would help us to be able to pay for goods and services in ways that we may not have been able to before across the region and
Across the region.
Across the region,
Excellent.
yes, and
Excellent.
OECS in particular. So,
Okay.
of course, that is what we see as being able to coordinate our efforts.
Yeah. Minister, thank you very much for bringing us up to another break here on the Economic Forum. We'll come back and continue more of a discussion, get more of your feedback, and stay tuned.
Join the Governor of the Central Bank of Barbados in January, May, August, and October as he explains the country's economic performance, reveals economic policy direction, answers your questions live online, and brings clarity to how the economy works and what to expect. The Central Bank of Barbados presents the Barbados Quarterly Economic Review. If you missed the live stream, download the recording or the full text on demand at centralbank.org.bb.
COVID-19.
Stay off
The government going to request.
We must stay alert.
The annual Sir Winston Scott Memorial Lectures have always brought us internationally acclaimed speakers who are innovating, discovering, and transforming the world we live in. We've discussed economics, science, culture, health, religion, the arts, climate change, and more. Saluting the first Native Governor General, Sir Winston Scott, and celebrating the country's independence, the bank brings this lecture to you every November. Stay tuned.
Hi everyone, I am Alicia Bascom, Administrative Officer in the Corporate Communications Unit with responsibility for internal communications at the Central Bank of Barbados. I first served as intern at the bank in 2005 and then again in 2006. Both times I was assigned to the Foreign Exchange and Export Credits Department. It was there that I learned how important the role of the bank is in monitoring the flow of foreign currency in and out of Barbados, and how implementing exchange controls assist us in maintaining a healthy foreign exchange reserves position. I also made lots of friends there who became family. Now that is one of the things that I cherish in being a central bank employee. Of course, outside of the knowledge and the skill set built while on the job. It has now been just over a year where I serve as Administrative Officer in our Corporate Communications Unit. And that involves working very closely with all the other departments right across the bank and ensuring that our internal publics are kept informed and abreast of what's happening, whether it relates to policy changes or just general information that they may need to know. Serving as Administrative Officer has been exciting, demanding, it's been informative, and it has really opened up a new chapter at the bank for me. I get to see the bank through new lens. At the central bank, you never stop growing, you never stop learning, and you are surrounded by some of the best minds in the financial sector. I really just want to say thank you to the Central Bank of Barbados for affording me the opportunity to become family. Thank you.
And our royal family is gathered right here in the Caribbean Economic Forum with our family coming in from Rwanda, Paula Ingabera, who's Minister of ICT and Innovation, Ronnie Taylor, Director of Data Processing in Barbados, and Akila Byron Nisbet, the Minister of Health, ICT, Entertainment, Entrepreneurship, and Talent Development in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Before we go to Anki Joseph for an update on the Facebook feedback, I noticed that Minister Ingabera wanted to weigh in on the matter that we were discussing just before the break. So Minister, let me give you an opportunity to do so now.
Sure, I'll be very brief. So as I was listening to the other speakers, I realized they left out a very important detail, which is the level of digital economy coordination that is happening on the African continent and that is led by the Smart Africa Alliance. And this brings together the different member states within Africa to think through what kind of coordination is required, not just from a policy and regulatory perspective, because this alliance brings together both governments and business leaders from across the continent that are doing something in the continent. And so the model that has been created with the Smart Africa Alliance is that for every member state that is subscribed to Smart Africa, you have a flagship program. And I'll take a case in point, like Rwanda is leading on smart cities and communities. And the idea is that in implementing smart cities and communities, we document a blueprint of what our lessons learned have been, so that any other country on the continent, when they choose to implement smart city solutions, they probably don't have to burn the same circuits that we did. And so it just serves as an easy way to learn from what each of the countries are doing, but to also enable faster digitization across the different economies. So I thought I should point that out because it's also been a great platform that allows us to really think about issues all the way from infrastructure to big data to smart cities to even energy, sustainable energy solutions, but allowing for each country to test and try, share their lessons learned, and then those can be used with the other countries as they replicate some of these interventions across their economies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. We'll come back and give the panel an opportunity to respond some more, but let me turn our attention to Anki Scott Joseph's tracking of the online activity. She's watching everything happening on Facebook. Your comments, reaction, questions, etc. Anki, it's all yours.
Hi, Julian. Good evening again, viewers. Our discussion, which started out looking at the enabling environment and the usefulness of public-private partnership agreement to drive the process, was shifted towards looking at how do we facilitate the end user to ensure that there is data protection, data privacy, and how do we build trust. The more advanced and persuasive the technology becomes, it means that we need to have more trust by the users. It seemed thus far that the benefit from digitalizing appears to yield greater benefit for the supplier as opposed to the consumer. So we can see that we need policies in the economy that enhances not only the value for the consumer, but for the overall quality of life. And Rwanda is a very useful case because, as we've seen, it's a mere 8.4%. But we have seen that Rwanda is one of the leading countries when it comes to e-governance. So there is a question for Her Excellency Minister. What levels of institutional arrangement were required by the government to monitor and analyze the activities of the services to ensure that there's significant consumer protection, which seem to have been useful because of the levels of social well-being and social benefits that the users would have been benefiting from in Rwanda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anki. So the question is posed, Minister. What is your answer?
Thank you. Again, from a consumer protection perspective, and I did allude to some of the institutional arrangements that were put in place, about 23 years ago, and one of them is the regulatory authority, which has a very unique outfit because they are multi-sector regulator. I think we have cases where you have a telecom or ICT regulator that has just that specific focus, and then for the other industries you have different regulators. But for the case of Rwanda, we have one who is taking on telecommunication, water and sanitation, energy, transportation, and so also consumer protection happens to be one of the uh, focus areas that they're looking at today, but also ensuring, even putting in place some of the mechanisms to ensure not just about the awareness, but also how the consumer is protected, whether it's from the hardware devices that are being put at their disposal, even some of the software solutions. Again, that's also a thin line because it's something that it's a shared responsibility with the National Cybersecurity Agency. And I like, again, I think the way the question was framed is what level of institutional arrangements are required. And it comes back to the agility and flexibility that is built into how many of these institutional arrangements evolve over time to respond to a specific mandate. Some are created, others are merged. The National Cybersecurity Agency, its functions until this year were already part of an existing authority that is in charge of ICT implementation across government. But over time, recognizing the need for a very dedicated focus on cybersecurity, but also, like one of the panelists rightly said, as we go digital more and more, as we go online, our lives, work, everything has shifted online. So have the nature of attacks and also the scale of attacks that we get. And so you need that dedicated focus on that. Interestingly, today we also passed the data protection and privacy law here in Rwanda, which in many ways has aspects that are also touching on this consumer protection element. And the good news is that in terms of the institutional arrangements required to support the enforcement of this data protection and privacy law, the same regulator together with the National Cybersecurity Agency have that shared mandate of ensuring that consumer protection is really taken care of adequately. And so again, it's really that evolution that has to happen. It's the collaborations, the partnerships that have to happen across the board to ensure that anything that rises that really requires the attention of be it the teams that are in charge of consumer protection, data protection, they are able to adjust to these growing demands.
Excellent. Let's get some more of the feedback to the audience watching the Caribbean, around the Caribbean and beyond. Let's go to the email box one more time and pull up another one of the contributions. Over the next 5 to 10 years, how do you see digitization contributing to economic growth in Barbados and St. Kitts? Ladies first this time around. Minister Byron Nisbet.
Thank you so much. Well, certainly when you digitize your economy, you create a platform and an avenue by which the users are able to increase their offerings and services. And as I would have indicated earlier, one of the things that our government would have introduced just this year is a new ministry on entrepreneurship, entertainment and talent development, which focuses specifically on innovators and creatives. And so through the digital platform, we are hoping that the Ministry of this new Ministry of Entrepreneurship will be able to lay the groundwork necessary for our creatives and innovators to continue to grow their business ideas. As a matter of fact, just recently we would have seen the launch of the St. Kitts Nevis Robotic Association, which tells us that our young people are geared up and ready, and our society is geared up and ready to leverage from the digital transformation and the digital economy. One of the things that we are focusing on is that we want to create producers of digital services. So we don't want it to just be a matter of consumption. And so part of our digital transformation is retraining of our citizens so that they begin to think about how can they use the services being provided in order to become producers of the service or even leverage it to enable their businesses to propel and go forward. So in the next 5 to 10 years, we are in our build-up phases. So it will take us some time. As I said, our strategy is for another 2 to 3 years with a setback in 2020. But in 5 to 10 years, we should see more persons jumping onto and embracing the digital platforms provided and using them as a way of propelling themselves into areas and businesses that would allow them to grow. Once they grow their businesses and these businesses emerged in terms of innovation and creatives, then of course that would allow our economy to grow as well. So it's about creating that foundation that gives them the opportunity to be able to move forward in a digital economy, not just being consumers, but also being producers, which could sell their services and in turn have returns on investments, not just for the individuals, but for the economy as well.
Rodney, what's the Barbados experience?
Well, it's a very good question, and I think there is actually very little, 0 to very little economic growth in the future without digital being a part of it. Digital impacts in every sector, whether it is tourism, in terms of the sharing economy, the likes of Airbnb and Uber and so on. It is disrupting every sector. So we can't talk about the future without talking about digital transformation. So how is that impacting the hotel sector? How is that impacting the tourism sector? How is technology impacting the agriculture sector and manufacturing with the advent of 3D printing and so on? And so we have to understand that it is not, it is intricate to our survival as a region. We have to digitally transform. It's impacting across all sectors. And in some cases, and in fact in most cases for the public sector, and in particular because of COVID, you're just not able to deliver some public services unless there is a digital option. And so that is critical. Even the renewal of driver's license, when there was the lockdown here in Barbados, there are persons who simply could not renew their driver's license. And if your driver's license is required for you to work, then you could not work. And I had very real examples of that. And so it is not it is sort of do or die, and we have to get it right. We have to understand that this is where the future is trending. And with respect to the question about the benefits to citizens or to government or to businesses, if the citizens are at the center of all of this digital transformation, then we are not really hitting the mark. Everything that we do is supposed to be citizen-centric. It is driven by their demand for the services. It is driven by their convenience. If you're still getting into your car to drive to find a park and to spend an hour or so standing in line, then that is antithetical to what we understand digital transformation to be, which is the convenience of accessing a service at home, on your computer, on your mobile phone, or what have you, as you do with Amazon and all of the Google and all these online services. And this is what government and public services is supposed to be. And it is supposed to be centered around the citizen and his or her needs. Thank you.
All right, I'm just sitting here thinking that when we started this show 7 years ago, our feedback came by email or by telephone, but we're digital too, with the show running live, of course, on Facebook, and also taking responses from our viewers by WhatsApp. That's what's up next. So let's check the feedback. As we look towards further digitization, are we considering negotiating with internet service providers to reduce the cost of internet connectivity? Well, that could be anybody's question right now. But let me go to the country with the longest experience in this exercise. Rwanda, Minister?
Well, I must say this is still a challenge that we still grapple with, and probably just like many countries will continue to grapple with. But in essence, I think even if you went with some of the formulas that are being used with even taking an example of Italy or any other countries where there is this drive towards ensuring that at least the cost of internet for a citizen or for a household is probably 2% of what their income is. And maybe over time that will also start to go lower and lower. But what does this mean? I think by and large for many of the economies, we're achieving, the minister from KITS did mention the internet penetration statistics that they have. I think similarly when you look to Rwanda and many of the other countries, when you look at the level of penetration, it's high. And this is really looking at the coverage that we have. I think what still lacks is that the adoption and usage rate is not commensurate to the coverage that we've been able to gain over the investments that we've made. And so in certain parts of the countries of the economy, it will make sense, absolute economic sense to even make some of these deployments. When you go to rural areas, governments have to put in place subsidies to allow for a much cheaper cost of investment for many of these internet service providers. But I think the next level that we're going at, and just to share what our experience is going forward, is how do we also think of this as a bundled service for many of our households, for many of our citizens. For the private sector, for the ISPs, for the telcos, they'll tell you for the prices to go down. It's a chicken and egg scenario. For the prices to go down, we need to have the volumes, the demand. But the demand can only be triggered by price going down. And so I think that's where initially government has to step in, one, and say, if we're putting in place subsidies, whether it's the Universal Access Fund, whether it's other different subsidies that we can put in place, how do we first lower the cost of investing into this infrastructure? Because that ultimately is what dictates the final price point that a citizen is going to pay. And then, of course, the next level should be how do we create those bundled services and packages that allow for anyone, whether it's people who are living at the poverty line, below the poverty line, to still access some form of digital connectivity. I think one of our colleagues on the panel here did mention something to do with the investments that are being done around public Wi-Fi. I think the driving objective of public Wi-Fi in many times is just so, even for those that won't afford these internet bundles, can we still offer some form of hub where they can go and access the internet and be able to, trade and, seek healthcare services, get government services. And so increasingly as for Rwanda, what we're doing, and this is something we're trying to structure together with the World Bank, is how do we look at those places where we need to drive connectivity but also make it affordable, and how do we create these what we call community hubs. For example, if we're going to do school connectivity, healthcare facility connectivity, how do we still make it a community hub that allows for the communities around those different establishments to come and benefit from the connectivity that is being provided. And of course, gradually the demand starts to pick up. And I mean, when you talk about internet connectivity, it's just building a highway. So until we create the relevant content that is localized in nature, that responds to a particular need, then it may not, the willingness to pay for that service may not be there. And so really it's pulling different levers at the same time until we reach that optimal juncture where the price of connectivity goes down, but also people have the right services and they have the right incentive to be able to access these services.
All right, so we got lessons from Rwanda. Let's turn to more of the feedback from our audience, but this time we've got a survey question out there. We checked it earlier, and it focused on the matter of identifying the biggest challenge to digital transformation in the Caribbean. And look at the change now. Culture and mindsets is really at the heart of the transformation required in our region at 80%. Nearly 80% really. After that, well, between budgets and technical expertise, they're balanced down just over 10%. But really and truly, the culture and mindset is really the heart of the transformation path. I want to ask Rodney Taylor really to respond to that. Is that true, or is that something that we bandy about on the back of reservations that some people have in terms of this process?
I wholeheartedly support that, and I think that the change in culture and mindset is critical. I smiled when the Minister Ingabire from Rwanda mentioned the digital ambassadors. We actually have digital ambassadors here in Barbados, and they're University of the West Indies students who are basically as a part of the Give Back program, and so they volunteer to help us in terms of raising the level of digital literacy nationally, because a tech-savvy population is critical to digital transformation. You can put all of the services online. If nobody has the confidence, the ability, or the trust in those services, they will not take those services up. And so raising the level of digital literacy, cybersecurity awareness, all of these are critical. And we are actually leveraging, very similar to Rwanda, a digital ambassadors program. We have well over 100 university students that are involved, and they've helped us to roll out services like the driver's license, police certificate of character, the tax administration, the management information system, and so on. So that is critical. No question about that, and I think there has to be a concerted effort. There's also the National Training Initiative that is focusing on raising the level of digital literacy, not just for citizens, but also within the public service. So I wholeheartedly agree. The funding will come. Barbados itself has embarked on an IDB, a number of IDB-funded projects, the Public Sector Modernization Program, $40 million US, and so I mean, where there's the political will, the funding will come. The expertise, it is there, and if we can't get those services locally, we can find them regionally or internationally. But that culture and mindset, that is something that requires very much a nuanced approach, very concerted effort in order to ensure that our citizens are with us all the way. Thank you.
I couldn't deny Byron Nisbet, the Minister of St. Kitts Nevis, there the opportunity to deal with the matter of pricing, because you have ECTEL managing that process at the start of the liberalization.
Mm-hmm. And ECTEL continues to do that as well through local NTRC. And as I would have indicated earlier as well, we would have tabled the Electronic Communications Bill, which also addresses that within that piece of legislation. And so price control in terms of being able to manage the costs to the end consumer, yes, that is an effort that is managed through ECTEL, and we have been seeing great turnaround and achievements with having that managed by that regional level, because it ensures that not just in St. Kitts and Nevis, but this is a control across the Eastern Caribbean as well. But I also wanted to touch on that idea of the cultural mindset, because for me, what I like to tell persons is that change is something that's difficult for everyone. And so once you begin to implement change, you will get pushback. And so that's why it's important when you're transforming your economy, especially digitally, that you have change management and you have those change managers who allow you to be able to easily get the process moving and get persons to come along a lot easier. And with our new mode of social media and those things, I believe that what Barbados is implementing in terms of, I think he calls it, not sure remember what you're calling it, but to me they are also change managers, but those persons who will be able to speak to how this new digital economy can help us on an individual level. So it's once we make sure we focus on change management, but apart from change management, we also have to make sure we have that proper training. And so for instance, here in St. Kitts, we are grabbing our young people from around the ages of 10 to 15. And what you see is that we have a summer camp with them that teach them future skills in terms of IT training. So we get them their mindset ready at that age. And I'm sure everybody knows once you have the youth who pushes it, they push their parents as well. And so we're seeing a lot of uptake in terms of the persons who would wish to have that type of skill training, and even the parents themselves step forward and want to be able to monitor or be able to use the same type of facilities that their young children are using. And so the training is going to be important in order for us to change the mindset. So that's what I wanted to touch on in terms of the culture and mindset. Is going to be about ensuring we implement proper change management from the beginning, so that as the change occurs, people are getting comfortable with that change.
Excellent. Let's go back to the audience and more of the feedback, this time by email. We've got a comment coming in, and hopefully it also revolves around a question. What about public education familiarizing and acclimating the common man to this new way of life, thinking it's best to do this in tandem with the new initiatives. Here we go. Let's let me ask the Minister of Rwanda on this, because again, I come to you every time because you've got the longest experience in this, and it involves so many millions of people. I mean, when we think of our small populations of 53,000 people in St. Kitts and 750,000 in Barbados, and you have to deal with 12 million and a land large mass, etc., you really must have more stories to tell us in this regard.
Thanks, Julian. And maybe let me push it a little bit higher, 13 million, if it makes a difference. But actually, I think earlier we did talk about the issue around, even as we embark on this digital economy journey for many of our countries, why skills should be one of the foundational investments, because if you have the money, you can lay out the infrastructure, the fiber, everything you need. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you're done. However, on the contrary, when it comes to skills, it's almost difficult to build these skills overnight. And so, which is why for any country that is starting to embark on such an agenda, looking at our lessons learned, one of the things I would even encourage is how do you start from the onset thinking about, the skills part of it. And skills is not just looking at digital literacy across the spectrum, it's also looking at some of those STEM fields that are crucial to drive the necessary innovations that are going to be relevant to your kind of economy. Now, I also talked about the Digital Ambassadors Program that is more focused on building digital literacy for citizens. Many times we look at citizens in small groups of whether it's activities of interest, whether it's by location, but really trying to build those kind of digital literacy type of trainings that support the kind of work they're doing. However, for the long-term sustainability of this, and which is why I like this question, is how do you embed this into the education, spectrum, all the way from, preschool up until higher learning, tertiary levels of education, and really being very deliberate about what different skill set do we need our children to have as they progress from preschool all through university, or even some of the technical vocational trainings that we have, because they're different channels to go through once you're done with secondary school, but really also thinking what skills do we want everyone to have, so that when they are done, regardless of what level they are at, as they come into the workforce, whether we're talking about the professional workforce or some of these non-professional, consortiums of people, they still have that basic digital literacy that is required for them to survive in the future, which is going to be heavily disrupted by digital technologies. I want to share one last example as I wind up on this question.
Thank you, Minister. I've got to cut you there because time flies when you're having fun. So I really have to give 30 seconds to the other panelists now to just wrap this. A quick one on the future. 30 seconds from you, Rodney.
Thank you very much. It's been very engaging, and the future is bright, I think, for us as a region. We have linkages with Africa, and I'm really glad to see Rwanda on the call and appreciate being here with the panelists. The future is digital, and I think the government is now embarked on a program that will help to take us there, including of course, the modernization of the public sector, which will help to drive innovation within the public sector and provide opportunities for our local innovators and entrepreneurs. And we need to, in summary, raise the level of digital literacy for our citizens. We need to ensure that they're able to transact in a secure environment, and we need to ensure that we do this in a regional context. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. And the last round to Minister St. Kitts Davis, 30 seconds or less.
Thank you so much. It really was indeed a pleasure to be on this panel. I think there are lots of lessons that we can learn from Rwanda, and I'm hopeful that I'll be able to get some contact information so that we can reach out for more advice. I think based on her panel discussion, we would have seen that St. Kitts and Nevis is actually on the right path, making sure we set that foundation that is necessary. But I also believe that we can also do more with collaboration and learning more from other persons who have been doing this for quite some time. So the information that would have been shared today from Rwanda would have certainly helped in allowing us to be able to see what next for us and how we'll be able to get there most successfully, being able to understand what were the difficulties and challenges, and then how can we overcome those challenges as we continue on our path to digital transformation.
Thank you very much to our panelists, and thank you to my partner, Anki Scott Joseph, who moderated the online activity. To all of you viewing, a very good time we expect and wish for you, wherever you are in the world. All the very best.